Hey Ben, you should take apart the official Microsoft Adaptive Controller. Okay. I actually bought this thing a few months ago just to kind of take a look at it and see what was up. Yeah, so the deal with it is it has all of these ports here on the end. And those ports are for all the different possible inputs. So there's a bit of a standard actually when it comes to accessibility controllers. This is a stereo plug, but it would still work. So basically you have a mono 1/8 inch jack, and then you hook it up to random accessories like foot pads and things. Then you close the switch, and on this controller that will activate the button for you.
Oh, that's interesting. It appears as a keyboard. That's interesting. Controller Xbox One for Windows. Well, this part looks the same. Oh, I wonder if you can use it to input keyboard commands. That may be kind of cool. I think I noticed the left and right analog sticks have their own USB port. I wonder if there's some other peripheral that's supposed to hook up to that. Strange. One thing I've noticed is that all of the digital buttons are ported out to the 1/8 mini jack, but not the analog sticks. And that also includes, I don't know if you can see it there, but left trigger, right trigger, which makes me wonder if there's any analog functionality left of those. I've got the other end of this plugged into the D-pad up. Let's see if we can get a signal. Hey, there it is. I'm curious about this, if it's actually analog or if it's just going to go straight down. So the Z-axis there, that's what actually indicates the trigger. It is moving at an analog value. This is a resistance substitution decade box. Basically, you connect something between these two terminals, and then you can create all sorts of variable resistance. Set up to 10 mega ohms, and it's not moving. Okay, so if I switch those off, okay, now it closes the circuit and we get a signal. All right, you had to get in some pretty large resistance, but look at that. You can actually give it an analog value. See how it's dipping? Interesting. All right, well, let's see what the range is. 1 meg gets you about there. So it looks like, yeah, like a 1 mega ohm resistor would get you a good range. That actually makes sense because 1 mega ohm is a pretty common size when you have like those big large ones. Let's grab one. I'm going to disconnect the leads from the decade box and connect it to this 1 mega ohm potentiometer. One side should be fine. All right. Let's dial it and see what happens. Oh, look at that. There we go. So I went on the Microsoft site, and yes, indeed, LT and RT can accept either digital signals, open or close switch, or an analog signal. So that's cool because there are some games where, how hard you hold the trigger affects gameplay, like a racing game, or some games also use that for aiming. So I looked this up. This is a USB port. Apparently, you just plug in HIDs, human interface devices, into it, and it will detect the analog from it and pass that along the left analog stick, and then you plug another one into the right, and that becomes the right analog stick. That seems a little convoluted. I think it's time for some stickception. Hey, look what I found. An old Teensy 2.0. Okay, I already hooked this up to my big PC, and I made a really simple program that just sweeps the analog range of the joystick. So let's see if this works with a controller. Plug it in. Also, the USB is upside down. I would say that's weird, but I'm sure they did it because it's easier to route the PCB. Okay, so if this were working, we would see this moving here. It was, doing something on the big computer, but again, this is a HID going through another HID. The controller is active. Like if I push these buttons, I can see things. All you need for an analog stick, as far as plugs, is a voltage reference, then ground, X, and Y. Maybe the reason they didn't port it out was because having a voltage reference and ground would be a possibility to short out the system, and they didn't want that. I don't know. But it just seems overly complicated to make people use the analog sticks that way. Well, you know what? We can come back to that. How about, for now, let's take it apart. Oh, yeah, it's got the good old security screws. Same size as the Xbox One controller. Now this sells for $100, which is a lot less than I charge for my modified controllers. Unfortunately, this thing can hardly do anything without a bunch of accessories. And I think that's kind of an issue if you ask me, because think about it, you need some sort of pedal or plug for all of these functions, and you basically need all these functions to play a game. Come on. There we go. Not too difficult. Not too skinny, not too fat. She's a real humdinger, and I like it like that. Well, a lot of nice structuring under here. This prevents the unit from being crushed, because I think, you probably could, you could have this on your feet. That'd be kind of cool. The two big buttons. Yeah. All right, so it looks like there's a subframe. We got to remove that to get at the PCB. And let's see. There, 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 and there. I mean, ideally, it would be cool if they just had, like a big circuit board with a whole bunch of test pads on it, or, header vias. Then you can do whatever you want. Because this thing seems kind of big. And it looks like the circuit board goes all the way up there, too. So circuit board, or the area of a circuit board, actually adds a lot to the cost. So yeah, even if I quibble on design factors with this, it's still cool that Microsoft made it. Alright, so we got a little Lipo. Okay, pretty decent sized one. What's it got? Dooba-dooba-dooba-dooba-dooba. 2050 milliamp hours. That's not bad at all. That's bigger than what you'd have in the PlayStation 4. Oh, take a look at this. The micro switches for the big buttons. Well, first of all, they're micro switches, which is good. But anyway, they're mounted to the subframe. So we're gonna have to remove those. Is that right? Oh, you know what it is. These jacks back there. So we're gonna have to push up and out. Oh, look, see, just like on the controller, they've got the loose headphone jack. Whoa, that is one big chunky D-pad. It looks like it's from the Giant World in Super Mario 3, was it? Yeah. I always thought that Giant World was cool. For some reason, this makes me think of the DJ Hero controller. All right, let's take a closer look. All right, we've got some nice tack switches here for the D-pad. Again, they're making this thing fairly robust. And some surface mount tack switches for the rest of the buttons. And then through-hole vias for all of the jacks. That's good. That gives it added strength. Way over here we have the other USB port. Now you can see why the USBs are upside down, because they're mounted to the bottom of the PCB. So see, if they were mounted to the top of the PCB like that, then they would be right side up. FTDI chip. I'll have to look that up. Another chip over there. That's probably some sort of bus expander, because if you look, the traces are coming from it, and then they're staggering up to all the buttons. I'm gonna mark where these were. It's a good thing to do, because when you take something like this apart and then you go to put it back together, and you find all of these random holes, and you're like, what goes in those random holes? All right. They have a lot of protection circuitry on all of these inputs, which is a good thing. Microsoft and ARM working together! Dun dun dun! One thing people might not realize about ARM is, ARM Advanced Reduced Instruction Set Computer Machine is an architecture, and it's licensed out to manufacturers. And the, I want to say the Xbox 360 controller had an ARM chip on it, and then the Xbox One actually had a Freescale. I'm just kind of wondering, where's the, oh, there it is. There's the wireless functionality right there. They're just using PCB antennas, but you could hook additional antennas up there and there. A few headers in here, like, I wonder what this is meant for. what's on it? Let's see. It's a large trace, which is probably power. And of course, the FTDI chip is right next to it. And FTDI, usually known for making serial communication chips, right there. Let's look at the data sheet for that FTDI chip. Vinculum 2 embedded dual USB host controller IC. Dual USB. So there's your left and right analog USB input. Embedded processor core. 16-bit Harvard architecture. Now that doesn't refer to the kind of buildings you'd go to college inside of. Harvard architecture means the program memory and the flash program itself and the working RAM are all separate, as opposed to von Neumann architecture where they're all in the same memory space. So host means it's, like your computer, it's hosting, and then the slave or device is what gets plugged into it. So the device would be your controller, but in this case, this adaptive controller is acting as the host. Basically, it's hosting USB devices stuck into it. Oh, here we go. Add USB host capability to embedded products. Well, that's what it's being used for in this case. There we go. And as we saw on the board, it has its own crystal, which is X in right down here. Then here's USB 1 and 2. So this FTDI chip is a USB host controller. It can do 2 USB ports. And what does this unit have? 2 USB ports. Let's see if there's a connection. So I've got my probes here. I don't have it set to beep. Rather, I have it set to resistance because, again, there's a lot of protection circuitry going between these two things. So there's not going to be a direct connection, but maybe we'll see some sort of correlation. So I'm going to go to one of the pins right here. Probe over here. Open line turns into, there we go, 5 ohms. And then this one should be the other one in the USB. And 5 ohms. Cool. All right, so this FTDI chip is acting as a host controller for the 2 USB 2 devices that can be plugged into this controller. I mean, that doesn't really help us with the compatibility issue. If anything, it makes it worse because there isn't a simple way to, basically get analog joystick control into the main system on a chip. Okay, the other device that was on the board, yes, I guessed correctly. It is a I/O expander, so it's using the I2C bus. Okay, yeah, so we have interrupt, voltage, SDA, SCL, which is your I2C lines, reset, another voltage, address, which is how you select what the I2C address is on the bus, which means you could have 2 of these on the same bus since you have one address line, 0, 1, that gives you 2 options. Binary, ground, and then our 24 bits of data. Just basically a way to expand the I/O of the system, which makes me think there's not very much I/O on that Microsoft ARM chip that we saw, which is why it needs this external USB host device and the external I/O expander. Also, the I/O expander here, it has 24 bits of I/O expansion. It looks like there's 2 bits going to each one of these switches. Which is, well, I guess there might be a reason you want to do that. You could change the polarity of it. Yeah, so I think this expander might not be getting us all of the plugs, but most of them. So they probably just added this to make up for a lack of I/O. So yeah, the Microsoft Adaptive Controller. Overall, I'd say, I don't know, I would have certainly done it differently, if it was up to me. I mean, it's really cool that they made it. They have all these great ports here. But the fact that you have to use very specific controllers for the left and right analog seems very limiting. And the fact that you need 2 of them, whatever it is, how it's split up, also not really the best way to go, if you ask me. Yeah, but inside, it's a pretty simple controller device. It's ruggedized. It's, I think it's definitely worth $100. It's built well. I don't think you're going to break this thing very easily. Yeah, so, if you think this might work for you, give it a shot. Just keep in mind you're going to need buttloads of accessories to make it do anything because, as we all know, most games use up every button on the controller and then some. So I think I'll just put this back together and then maybe, resell it or give it away to someone in need. But, since I've been building accessibility controllers for 12 years, much longer than Microsoft,
I wanted to take a look at this official product and see what it was all about. Well, thank you for joining me on this quest to take apart and see what was inside the Microsoft Adaptive Controller.